All right, so first off, thanks again for coming to the workshop today. We're going to be working on decision making. Basically, what we're going to be doing is expanding on if-else statements like we did in CFS, except now we're going to be looking at how we can transform an if-else into a switch case, depending on what we're working on and things of that nature, how to transform something into an arrow function and things like that. So let's go ahead and begin. And I'm going to start off like I always do. I'm going to start a new project here. I'm going to create a new folder. Call it June 18 Workshop. I'm going to open it in my text editor. And I'm going to go ahead and create a JavaScript file here so that we can work on it. And so what we're normally used to is if-else statements. That's what we learned in coding from scratch, but we can transform it into a switch case. If you find yourself using a lot of else ifs, else if, else if, you might want to ask yourself, can I do this with a switch case statement? So let's go ahead and let's create a switch case. Well, first we'll do it with an if-else statement, and then we'll transform it into a switch case. So let's pretend that, let's add an HTML page here actually. We'll make it interact with the DOM here. So I have my HTML. I'm going to rename the document here, June 18 Workshop. And before I forget, I'm going to link my script tag so it can communicate with my JavaScript file. And let's get an input from a user. I'm going to give it an ID of shoe. And I'm also going to add a button with an on-click feature that is going to get price. And I'll say get price here on the button. And then I'm just going to have an H1 tag that is going to display the price once we've gone through the function, and I'll just give it an ID of price. Okay, so I have written my HTML skeleton. I have an input here with an ID of shoe. I have a button with the on-click attribute get price. So I need to make sure I have a function in my JavaScript called get price. And I have an H1 element with an ID price where I'm actually going to display the price once I've calculated that in the JavaScript function. And then lastly, we have our script tag here to actually link my JavaScript with my HTML. So we are going to go ahead and create a function here called get price. That's what I called it. Yep, get price. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable shoe that is going to grab what the user inputted into the input. So I'm going to document get element by ID. The ID is shoe, and then I'm going to grab the value of that input. So right here, I am just grabbing the actual element itself. I want what's inside of that element, what the user wrote in that box, so I'm going to go ahead and grab the value. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to see what kind of shoe it is, and if it's a certain type of shoe, then it's going to have a certain price. So I'm going to create another variable here called price. So I'm going to let price. Not going to set it equal to anything yet because I will do that once I can determine what type of shoe that we're looking at. So if we are looking here, let's say we have a list of shoes. So if shoe is equal to Air Force, then the price is going to equal 150. Else if, and I'm just listing Nike shoe names. You're wondering where I'm getting these names from. Else if shoe is equal to Air Max, I am going to set price equal to 125. Else if shoe is equal to Zoom, I am going to set price equal to 105. Else if shoe is equal to Air Jordan, price is equal to 175. Else if shoe is equal to Lunar, I'm going to give it a price of 135. And then I'll have a else statement here that will set price equal to invalid entry. In case they put something that is not any of these, we'll just say it's an invalid entry. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out, and then we're going to transform this into a switch case, and then we're going to transform it into an arrow function. So I am going to go ahead and, well, before I test it out, are there any questions on the if-else, if statements? All right, so then we'll go ahead and open this, and it's opened over here. Move that over here. So if I go over here and I type in Air Force, I don't get anything. Oh, I forgot to change the inner HTML. That might be helpful. So I need to grab my document, get element by ID. The ID of that H1 tag is price. So price dot inner HTML. Now remember, inner HTML is what's in between our opening and closing tag. On line 12 here, there's nothing in between the opening and closing tag. So what we're going to do is we're going to grab that space and we're going to set it equal to something. And what that's going to be equal to is price. So we'll save that and we'll go back and refresh. Type in Air Force and I have a price, 150. I type in something else, say Lunar, get another price. If I type in Pumas, I get invalid entry. So everything's good and working, but let's go ahead and turn this into a switch case. So I'm going to go ahead and write the exact same functionality, except instead of using if statements, I'm going to use a switch case. So I'll still create the function get price. I'm still going to get my user input, so I'll still let shoe equal get element by ID, shoe dot value. I'm going to get price. And then we're going to go ahead and begin our switch case. So with a switch case, the way that it works is you write switch and then you have in parentheses. What you have in your parentheses is what you're looking at. So what we are looking at is the variable shoe, what the user wrote. And let me just confirm the syntax here, make sure I don't mess it up here. So switch case, and then we have our curly brackets, and then we start listing out our cases. So we'll have our first case, which is going to be Air Force. And if that is the case, Air Force, then I want price to equal 150. And then I'm going to break out of this case. Okay. Then I'm going to check my second case. Case Air Max. If that is the case, then I will set the price equal to 125. And then I'm going to break from that case. Then I will check my next case, which is Zoom. And if that is the case, then I will set price equal to 105. Then I will break. Then I will check my next case, which is Air Jordan. And I will set that price equal to $175. Then I'll check my case for Lunar. And if that's the case, oops, I forgot a break statement here. Got to break out of it. Then I will set price equal to $135. And break there. And then just like we do the else for if else, we have default. And default, we will set price equal to invalid entry. And there we have our switch case. So if we are looking at the difference between if and else if statements between switch cases, what you are saving is time and energy, right? Because they're essentially doing the same thing. If statements, we are checking to see if this is true or false. What we're checking to see here is if that's equivalent, if that's the exact value of it. So you can't necessarily replace all if, else, if statements with a switch case, but you definitely can if you're just checking to see if something is equal to something. Like if this was greater than or equal to, then you can't put greater than or equal to here. We're just checking to see what the value of shoe is. So if it's any of these values, then we're going to set price to a certain value, and then we're going to break out of it. What this break does, it means that we are breaking out of the switch case. So it will jump to outside of that last curly bracket and move on to the next line of code, which would be the document get element by ID, shoe, oops, no, price dot inner HTML, and we'll set that equal to price. Okay, so these two functions right here are doing the exact same thing. We just wrote them differently. Kind of the beauty of code is that there's not one right answer. We just need to make sure that the functionality works the same. So we're going to go ahead and comment this out over here, and we're going to test this out, make sure it works. So here we will refresh, and we will put Air Jordan, and we have our price. I put Adidas and get invalid entry. If I do zoom, we get our price. So here we have transformed an if, else, if into a switch case. Are there any questions on either this portion here or the switch case, or how I changed this into a switch case?
No.
Okay, awesome. So we have successfully transformed an if else into a switch case. Now we can transform this get price function into an arrow function. But before I transform that, let's go ahead and look at how an arrow function is set up. So an arrow function is we're using the keyword const, and we're giving it a name. So let's just call it name. And then we have an equal sign. After the equal sign, we have our parentheses. This is where we are putting our parameters. If you don't have any parameters, then you just leave it blank, and then you have your arrow. The arrow is almost like a replacement for the curly brackets. So here we can just do console.log. Actually, let's change this to greeting so it makes sense. And I can console.log hello. Okay. And I, in one line, have written the whole function. This line right here could be written just like how we have been. Function greeting with our parameters, our curly brackets, and then a console log of hello. Okay, so these two functions are the same. Instead of function, we have const. We still have the function name, greeting, greeting. The parameters have been switched to here. The curly brackets are now the arrow, and what we want to happen is what comes after the arrow. Now, in some cases, you will have to use curly brackets if you have more functionality in your function. Right here, we can easily write it in one line of code because our function is only doing one thing. But if I wanted to transform this entire function into an arrow function, we're definitely going to need that curly bracket. So any questions on the difference between these two before I transform this get price function into an arrow function? All right, so let me go ahead and comment that out.
It's basically just to make it shorter. It's just a different way of doing it.
Right, it's going, it'll be convenient at times just to just have an arrow function, and it's more popular in ES6, the newest version of JavaScript, because there's an implicit return when you have to return something, and you can set default values. I mean, you can set default values in a function as well, but it saves a lot of writing, which as all coders love because we write so much. It saves you a lot of time. But if we go ahead and transform this, we can easily do so. And I can take this out right here, and I will have const get price. I'm going to set that equal, and then I have no parameters, and then I will have my arrow. So now this is an arrow function. Since there's so much functionality going on in here, I can't just put it in one line of code. I will use the curly brackets and have it as I had it before. So if we test this out, we should get the same result. So if I go back over here and I refresh, and let's say we do error max, we still get the same results that we were expecting. So we have successfully transformed this function with if-else statements into an arrow function using a switch case. Are there any questions? Whether that be about the DOM, how I interacted with it, the switch case, the values, anything on if-else if statements, anything that you saw here that you may not be completely clear on.
I don't have any questions. It was just great watching you build it.
Awesome, awesome. All right, well, that is all I had for you guys. I wanted to make sure that you could understand switch cases because they are going to be very beneficial to you instead of writing if-else if statements. It's also another option available to you. Sometimes if-else if statements make more sense rather than a switch case, especially if you're not just checking equality. The only time that you want to change this into this is if you are checking for equality. Now, if you're checking for inequality, or if you're checking for greater than or less than or anything else, then you don't want to use a switch case. Now, if that is the case, you could have a function that returns true or false, and then just have a switch case for true or false here. But that might be more complicated, might be less complicated, depending on the problem that you're dealing with. But just so you know that these options are available to you when you're coding. So if there are no further questions, I'll go ahead and wrap this up. So if there is anything on functions, arrow functions, if-else, switch cases, the DOM, anything I wrote in the HTML, IDs, button on clicks, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and ask those. All right, well, I do want to thank you for joining me here today on the workshop. I hope this was beneficial. If you have any feedback or you have other topics you would like to see during the workshop, please send me a message on Slack and I'd be happy to do a workshop on those topics.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, and thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in the next workshop.